Give me money.
What is up, guys, and welcome into another episode of the Ain't It Funky podcast. My guest today is a man who needs no introduction, the one and only Mike Johnston. Mike is the founder of Mike'sLessons.com, one of the leading online education platforms for drums. Mike has been one of the faces of drum education of the past 20 years and is the only educator to have been featured on the cover of the Big Four of drum magazines: Modern Drummer, Drum, Rhythm, and Drummer UK. In our conversation, we spoke about drum books, Mike's practice philosophy, what it was like growing up side by side with Deftones and getting shown White Pony by his friend Abe Cunningham for the first time, and more. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe wherever you're listening. The video version is available on YouTube as well. Thanks for tuning in, and enjoy. All right, Mike Johnston, welcome into the podcast.
Dude, thanks for pronouncing the T. Many people leave the T out and they just say Mike Johnson. So that already I'm like, this guy's got it figured out. Good to see you again, man.
Dude, it's good to see you, man. Backstory for the listeners that don't know how we know each other. So we met at the UK Drum Show in Liverpool recently, and yeah, I mean, what an insane event. And dude, your clinic was just the most incredible, inspiring clinic.
Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. It was that, I think that whole weekend was something special, you know. I've been to that. Well, I've done the London Drum Show, that's what has now become the UK Drum Show. I think I did the London Drum Show twice, performed there, and then I've performed at the UK Drum Show on the main stage. But for the last 3 years now, I've had my own room, and it always is incredible and it's great. And there's just a great vibe there. But this year was something special. There was almost like an industry-wide acknowledgement that the UK Drum Show is the real deal on a worldwide level. It's always felt like a British event. And this time it felt almost like NAMM for drums, but for the world. You know, like there were Americans that flew there just to go there. And I'd never seen that before. I'm like, what are you doing here? And they're like, wanted to go to the UK Drum Show. And I'm like, whoa, okay. That's amazing. And so I just felt like there was just a magic in the air for everybody. Every artist I ran into was like 10% even more positive than normal, where I'm like, man, everybody's just so happy. So yeah, it was an incredible weekend for sure. And it was great to run into you there. We chatted a little bit via Instagram and stuff. And it's so crazy that technology can allow any of us to reach out to each other, meet, virtually. But then, especially if you're somebody that travels like you and I both do, there's a good chance that eventually you'll meet in person. And we had the chance to do that. So it was really cool.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. No, I think you summed it up perfectly, saying that, there was magic in the air at the event. And but Mike, I want to get right into I got so many questions marked down here, things I kind of want to touch on. So I always ask guests on the podcast about practice and their practice philosophy. But let me get this started with asking you, because you may have seen this clip as well on Drumeo of Dom Familaro talking about if you buy a book, like let's say Stick Control or Future Sounds or whatever book it might be, if you buy a book and you only work through the first 2-3 pages and then you move on to the next book, it's kind of like buying an actual book, like fiction, and only reading the first 2 or 3 pages. How do you feel about that philosophy? What's kind of your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. And it would be very weird if every time somebody asked you if you watched a movie, you said, yeah, I watched the first 3 minutes. It sucks. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, it was 2 hours long. So I think you might've missed the plot twist at the 90-minute mark. And so I definitely think that you have to see, I mean, there's so many different ways to practice. I'm highly caffeinated right now with the matcha, but there's so many different ways to practice. And so books are definitely one of the many ways to practice, but if we're just talking about books, these things are really snapshots of that educator's life, right? And so this is their first album. It's the thing they've worked on their whole life, and they're putting their whole life into it. And so it does a big disservice to only get a few pages deep, because in their minds, they're not going to start with the coolest thing in the book, or they're not going to start with the bulk of the information. They want to bring you into their world slowly. And sometimes it's really hard to get into that educator's world or that author's world. There's certain authors where I just think, man, I'm now on page 60 and I really still don't understand exactly what this concept is. What are we going for here? Sometimes the books like Syncopation, Stick Control, I think the reason why those are legendary is because they're not about the author, they're about the subject matter. So let's take Advanced Techniques for the Modern Drummer by Jim Chapin. That wasn't about Jim Chapin. That was about how to play jazz independence. And I remember even when I first started working on that book, I was like, well, how can it be jazz? It's written in 16th notes. Like, I didn't even understand what was happening. So sometimes you need a teacher to onboard you to this material. Then there's other times where the book is actually getting you closer to the drummer who wrote the book. So Future Sounds is a great example of, if you don't understand the syncopated funk playing of David Garibaldi, then work on Future Sounds, and that will get you closer to his world. You're not going to be auditioning for Tower of Power by the end of the book, but you will understand where some of this vocabulary comes from. I think that right now there's a serious problem. My generation had it with books, but now there's a problem with it in videos, which is like information hoarding. If you went to my house and went into my little drum room, you'd see probably like 40 different books that I have on shelves in my room. I've opened 2 of them. They're literally there for decoration. Then I have probably 100 books here at the studio, and I've gone through maybe 10 of them from front to back. It's so you have this thing in your mind of like, all right, I'm going to buy Brazilian coordination for the drum set, and I'm going to work through it. No, and then you get to the first groove and you're like, yeah, I'm good, dude. My plane's never going to go down in Sao Paulo, and I'm never going to crash land and have to make a living as a drummer in Brazil. I'm over this thing. And I think that it's important that if you're going to take on any kind of information, you need to be prepared to kind of see it through and understand that the social media version of art, it still doesn't work. There's no AI that can get us out of long-term practice. So eventually I just had to shift my mindset to like, this is the year of. So maybe this is the year of syncopated funk grooves. I'm going to work on Future Sounds and maybe some Rick Latham stuff. Or this is the year of time. And so for the rest of the year, I'm going to practice a ton of things, but my focus while practicing those things is going to be, are they in time? Am I rushing? Am I dragging? Can I control the time? So for me, a lot of the practice comes down to understanding that what you're working on is a broad concept that allows a lot of material to come to light, rather than working on licks and chops. Before you pressed record, you and I were talking about Dave Weckl. If I saw Dave do something that I really liked, it would never even occur to me to learn what he did note for note. I would actually ask the question, what allowed what he played to exist in the first place? So what was the subdivision? Was it linear or nonlinear? Let's say it was a triplet based thing. I love it. It's triplets. Okay, we got that. Was it linear or nonlinear? Well, I hit some crashes with some kicks. Okay, so it's nonlinear. Then are there any spaces? Is he mixing subdivisions? I had a couple rests. Okay, so it's a 16th note triplet, nonlinear phrase that is syncopated. Okay, that's what I'm going to work on. I'm going to work on 1,000 of those, and that'll allow me to create my own vocabulary in the style of the thing that I liked from Dave Weckl, rather than just copying somebody else note for note.
Right. Oh, that's such an interesting way of approaching it. But like coming back to books, what you said, there was like 10 books that you maybe worked through back to back. What were those books, just out of curiosity?
Definitely Future Sounds for sure. I think Syncopation, because I was teaching it so often, but I never taught it as it was written. I mean, that's the beauty of Syncopation, is you're just always telling somebody, once they can read quarter notes, eighth notes, and eighth note rests, then it's like, okay, this will be your left hand, and then we're going to be doing it over the jazz samba, or something like that. So syncopation, I don't even think I own a copy of Stick Control. I've never worked out of that. I feel like I know what rights and lefts are. I'm good. I can mix them up. I've got a Sharpie. I'll figure that one out. Even though it is a fantastic book, that's not one of the ones I worked out of. But I would say the book that had the biggest impact on me and made me the most excited to play drums from a book standpoint is a book called Advanced Concepts by Kim Plainfield. And it's just the coolest idea of a book ever. So Kim was just this, great educator and monster fusion player. And he basically made a book that is just advanced concepts of everything you already know. So if you think about like, oh, well, I know paradiddles. It's like, okay, well, Kim has 2 pages of advanced concepts with paradiddles. And like, oh, I know Afro-Cuban 6/8. Okay, well, here's Kim's advanced concepts with Afro-Cuban 6/8. So it's almost like an encyclopedia of cool things you can do with the things you already know. And it was such a fun book to open up to any random page and be like, well, I know the thing that he's building this off of. I have the blueprint, but I don't know how to do what he's doing with it. And then it would always be some, shifted accent, or where there was an accent, now it's a ghost note, and you move the kick slightly. And it was like, oh, this is so cool. And I didn't have to learn anything new, really. So yeah. And anytime I was working on something, if I was in like a Latin jazz ensemble or something, and we were doing a mambo or a songo, I would run to his book and find out like, well, what are his variations for these standardized grooves? And I would come up with something that was a little more fusion-esque. Well, I wouldn't come up with it. I would take his, and then I would try to morph it into something that was a little more me.
Right. Okay. I haven't heard of that book, but that's definitely one I got to check out.
It's a game changer. Get that on Amazon right away. Advanced Concepts by Kim Plainfield. It's just a fun book. And there's been a few others over the years that I really liked. Definitely The Art of Bop Drumming, I think, was a game changer back in the day when that came out. No one had really put together the bop phrasing or even like page after page of independence. That was just so incredible. And then, there's a few others, but, I will mention Anything by Chuck Silverman. So he did a lot of practical applications for Cuban drumming, practical applications for Brazilian drumming. I think that was the name of his series of books, was Practical Applications. But either way, whatever the names were, the Chuck Silverman books were absolutely incredible especially for world grooves.
Yeah. And so when when you've practiced in the past or when you practice now, what's kind of your approach to practice? Because I've got the Efficient Practicing for Musicians right here, Benny Grebb's book. And there's all sorts of like interesting ways to approach practice, obviously to make it everything more efficient, the process. So whether that's like setting a timer, recording yourself, the salami slice method, if you've heard of that, I think the salami slice is to like chop up each beat, as if you were like carving the slices with a knife.
Okay.
And going at it that way, or like, what's the other one? I can't remember, but yeah, anyway, but like what's kind of your approach to practice? How would you put together kind of a practice plan, if you will, if you wanted to go about that?
Yeah. I think it depends. So it depends on where you are in your journey. Like the way that I would practice for myself after playing drums for over 40 years is not the way that I would prescribe practice to my students that are, say, in their first 5 or 10 years, because they're in a place where they need to accumulate the information. They don't have any vocabulary. So you'll hear a lot of professional drummers say like, oh man, sometimes you just got to sit down and explore. And it's like, well, yeah, but you're a pro. Like you have a vocabulary to speak with. You can explore. That doesn't work when you don't have any words that you can say. Like you need to actually learn the vocabulary first. So for me personally, my practice is I would say there's the easiest way to describe it is it's the desired result technique. What is my desired result? What's the outcome that I'm shooting for? And then I have to reverse engineer the process from there. So let's say the desired result is to play, like a constant flow, shifting between 16th note triplets and 32nd notes, and have it sound beautiful and have it sound, more than anything, purposeful. Well, the first thing I have to figure out is what is holding me back from doing that. I can't just practice it and hope it'll get good. That's a waste of time. I have to figure out, well, what's holding me back? Is it physical? Maybe I'm just not fast enough to do this stuff. Or is it mental? Am I not able to keep track of the patterns? So a lot of times I'm breaking things into physical and mental. And so if it's mental, then maybe the case is, all right, let's slow down to almost like a slow motion pace and just see if we can speak freely, playing and shifting in between. And if I can do that, then okay, fine. And I speed it up. If it breaks at a point, if I can't do it at a point that I physically can go a lot faster, then I know it's a mental issue. Sometimes it's a physical thing where mentally I can sing the stuff fine. Like I'm not having any problems with it. I just physically can't play it very clean. And so then I go into more of like what I call a non-creative phase, which is, okay, I'm not creating. I just physically have to clean this stuff up. These chops, these licks, these patterns, I need to put on a metronome and be very clinical. But once that's done, then I go back to the creative phase, which is, okay, now can I just speak the language? So that's how I practice now. And then obviously, if it's something where there's something set in stone, like this is the thing I'm going to teach on YouTube next week, then really it is just repetition. So a lot of times I'll just throw on a playlist of my favorite songs and I'll just play the thing that I'm going to be teaching, literally for 45 minutes straight without any breaks whatsoever. And that way I can like speak, out loud with a lav mic on, and I can teach. Or like at the clinics, when I'm doing a clinic, I'm literally playing and teaching at the same time. And you need to have the reps in your body so that you have the fifth limb of independence to speak while you're playing these difficult things.
Right. Does that start with counting, or do you literally like straight away practice like speaking to?
Yeah, usually it's speaking. So because if you're counting, then you're speaking in time, and I'm trying to give the impression that like, hey guys, hope you're all doing well. This is no big deal. While really in my head, I'm like, holy crap, this is hard. So what I used to do, literally when I was like a teenager, but I did this all the way through like my private teaching and stuff. But I would just take an issue of a drum magazine or even a book, and I would just read the ads out loud while playing the thing I was playing. So I'd be playing like a jazz samba, and improvising with my left hand. And then I'd just read the Tama ad and be like, the Tama Superstar now coming in silver sparkle finish, and I would try to like announce the ad while playing this thing. And then if I could do that, then I knew I could put on a microphone and speak to a crowd while playing.
Wow, dude, that's just freaking fascinating right there. Like
it's sad. We can call it sad.
No, not at all.
That guy clearly had no friends.
That must take so much time in the shed, man, to be able to, because obviously some of the videos over the years, you can kind of tell you're speaking, and you even say out loud, you're like, holy crap, this is, it's tough to speak to this, or,
yeah.
But yeah, man, that's a pretty amazing approach to actually just read something out loud while you're practicing. And
well, that's what I used to make my students do. I would say, okay, or like, all right, we're playing paradiddles, in a private lesson, on a pad, we're facing each other, and we'd be playing paradiddles, and I'd say, all right, tell me your address out loud. And as soon as they said the first number of their address, it would fall apart, and we would just keep going until they could say their address out loud. But I was like, don't do that like 705 Gold Lake Drive. I'm like, we're not doing it in time. I want you to speak to me naturally. Tell me where you live. And then if they, then I would ask them like, are you dating anybody right now? And they'd be like, I'm 6. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe you're moving fast through 3rd grade. I don't know how it works. I don't have kids. And so we would, go through that. And the whole purpose of that is, I feel like if you can speak out loud while you're playing, you can think. And if you can think, then you can be playing and ask yourself, am I too loud for this room? Am I rushing? Am I dragging? Maybe something goes wrong on stage and you're free to tell the tech, Like, hey man, my bass drum beater just went through the head. Go grab another bass drum. Like, I don't want to do that in quarter note time. Hey, man, my bass. Like, it's like, dude, it's going to take a half an hour. Let's go. So that was always like a really important thing to me, is to be able to speak and play. And, you know, honestly, growing up, I didn't really idolize drummers as much as I idolized educators. And even to this day, when I see great public speakers, no matter what world they live in or what their career choice is, when they're doing their thing, maybe they're cooking and they're just literally pouring in sauce and a pinch of salt and they're just speaking to the camera flawlessly, I'm always thinking like, oh, I got to step up my game. Oh, just threw in some, I mean, like, was it a pinch of salt? Was it a teaspoon? I don't even know. My man didn't even look down. So I'm fascinated with people that can deliver information in an effortless way that allows the viewer to have a frictionless experience. If I know that you're struggling to deliver information, then now all of a sudden as the viewer, I'm starting to get kind of nervous for you. And I'm sure, you know, you and I have been going to clinics our whole lives. We've seen clinicians where clearly the thing they did better than anyone in the world was play the drums. Why would they be a great public speaker? And it can be a little like odd when it's like, oh, this person is probably pretty nervous. Like they don't even know the norms of public speaking. Like when you're done playing and you hit that last crash, do not grab a microphone. Your mouth is dry. Grab a bottle of water. The audience will wait. You don't have to rush through this. And sometimes I see people play a metal song, hit a crash, and just grab a mic, and they're like, "What's up, everybody? So, just great to be here at the UK Drum Show." I'm like, "Dog, take a beat." They will wait, and so like I don't feel bad hitting a crash cymbal and then not acknowledging anything and just grabbing a bottle of water and taking a sip, and then slowly making my way to the microphone while I'm trying to catch my breath. You know, it's like that's going to be better than being out of breath and not being. So, anyways, long story short, that part of everything is as big to me, if not bigger, than even the drumming itself.
Gotcha. Okay. And so with like your daily routine, I know you said in the past in podcasts or interviews that you get up at like 4 a.m. Do you still do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then
I don't really have a choice. That's not something that I'm going for. So I think it gets put out there as like, oh man, he gets up at 4 and he, you know, eats raw eggs. None of that. Like, it's just the schedule that my dog or my dogs were on, and my dog is on now. So I don't have an option. Like, my wife and I have always had Weimaraners. They're big dogs. They're like, you know, 80 to 100 pounds. And around 4 to 4:10 a.m., she just starts pawing my face. Like, I have no option. There's no alarm set. It's just, it happens. But unlike my wife, as soon as I wake up to feed Juno, our current dog, as soon as I'm up. Like, I can't do the feed her and then go back to bed. Once I stand up, it's like, well, we're here now. So yeah, so it's not something that I choose. I'd much rather sleep until like 8 a.m. But my hours are the same as everyone else's. Like, I just shift them earlier. So I'm in bed by 8 p.m. every night.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, if you see me like at the UK Drum Show and it's 9 and I'm at a restaurant, I'm wrecked. I'm in trouble at that point. I'm like, what is it, 2 a.m? And somebody's like, oh, it's 8:45. I'm like, holy crap, it feels late. So I get up about 4-ish, 4:15, depending on when Juno gets up. Yeah. She paws me in the face. I feed her. I make a matcha, take a shower, and then start the day.
Dude, love the Juno moments, man. The Juno moments in the videos they're the best.
She's pretty amazing. She's a camera thief. Like, she steals everything. I will teach the most deep, important thing I've ever taught in my life on YouTube, and all the comments are like, Juno's so cute. I'm like, all right, put my heart and soul into that one. And Juno just showed up and like licked my face in the middle of it, and now that's the thing. So
that's the one. Yeah, absolutely. And so when you get up at 4 a.m., like what is kind of your daily routine? That, you know, how soon do you kind of just start like getting into the day, or is it kind of a gradual getting up, or what's the routine like?
No, it's pretty quick. So feed Juno, and then literally go upstairs, take a shower, and then I'm usually ready by about 5:30 a.m. Go downstairs, make a little little vegetarian scramble, and then I'm off. And I'm usually if I go to the gym in the morning, then I'm at the gym at 6, get back at 7, and kind of freshen up and go to the studio. But right now, I've been so obsessed with like filming content and making stuff for the website that I can't go to the gym in the morning. Like my brain is way too active. So I just walk in and I lift like one little heavy thing and I put it down and I run out the door. So, cause all I want to do is like create. I just want to film stuff. I want to, teach. And so, right now I'm usually getting to the studio at 6 a.m. I mean, it's crazy because I come here and the parking lot is completely empty and I'm like, I'm the only one that doesn't have a real job. Why am I here? Why am I the only car in the parking lot? I'm a musician. I don't need to be here. But yeah, so I get here at like 6 a.m. and it's kind of weird the way my studio is set up. The only place that has windows is my lobby. So if I want to film something using my lobby, I have to do it before 8 a.m. because then the sun comes up and it's too bright in there. So I usually try to get all the Instagram stuff done. If there's like this morning, I filmed stuff for Instagram and there were some lobby shots and the sun was coming up. It was like 7:15. I was kind of freaking out and I was like, oh my gosh, like what if I miss it? What if the sun hits the floor? It's going to ruin the white balance. And, so I usually do that. And then, I start filming and then basically my day is split up between filming content for social media. So Instagram and YouTube are my two main platforms. I would say YouTube is my main platform. And then content for mikeslessons.com. And then I would say the bulk of my day is reviewing session submissions for the website. So we have a feature called Sessions, and that's the only part of the website where me and the students work together. The sessions are songs that they have to record. And the difference is they can't move on. All of the sessions are locked. There's 30 of them and they're all locked. And then I'm the one that has to review their video and unlock the next one. Or not unlock it and say, I'm sorry, you didn't pass because of these reasons, fix these issues. You opened the hi-hat where you weren't supposed to, or you added a kick. And that stuff is so much fun because we have lots of students and I've been doing this since 2008 as far as like mikeslessons.com, and I've never known if people were getting better because they weren't submitting anything. Like I didn't know. It's like I don't know what you're working on. People would just say like, oh yeah, I love the website, and I'm like, great. I'm not doing this just for a job. Like I want to know that people are getting better, and now I actually get to see it and help them in ways that'll change everything about how they play and how they interact with other people. So like, let's say that somebody's working on session 1 and they're fairly new to the drums and they come out of a fill and hit a crash without a bass drum. It's so awesome to tell them like, hey, just a heads up. I know you're brand new to this, no big deal. But every time you hit that crash, especially coming out of a fill, for the most part, you're going to want to hit the bass drum. That's going to change everything they do for the rest of their life. And I got to be present for that moment because someone told us that, we didn't just figure it out. Somebody said, oh, you can't hit the shiny thing without the bass. It feels really weird, And so it's really cool to be able to do that stuff. So yeah, I would say right now we still get about 50 to 70 session submissions a day. And I have to review every single one of those. So I kind of set aside little hours of my day to be like, okay, I'm going to do an hour of session reviews and then I'll do another hour, at like 5 p.m. or something. If I do them all at once, it's not healthy. I get kind of cranky. I'm like, that was supposed to be a ghost note. Failed. I'm like, okay, step away, Johnston. Go on a bike ride. It was one little ghost note. Let it slide. So I probably do like maybe 15 to 20 in a row, and then I'll film some stuff, and then our studio. Not to go into too much of a tangent, but our studio is right on the American River in Folsom, California. Like our building is on the riverfront, and so I'll just usually around 2 p.m. every day, I either go for a bike ride or I go out paddle boarding. And so I've got paddle boards here at the studio, and I just walk out of our parking lot straight to the river and do like 45 minutes of some sort of nature combination, like exercise and nature, just to be like, okay, I've been in a room by myself with cameras all day. Let's reconnect to the world.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. I'm so jealous about that. That's I I wish
you are
I had
living your
the,
best life in Berlin. I mean, you're doing all right, Harry.
Yeah, I guess, it's not too bad. And I mean, I only just got here, so obviously I've got everyone bombarding me with messages, and it could be worse. It could
Could
be
be worse.
worse for sure.
But next time you're in Northern California, come by
Oh,
the studio. I'll make you a matcha. We'll go paddle boarding. Just two
dude,
bros hanging out on the American River.
that would be freaking insane, man. Yeah,
You got it,
that
buddy.
would be that would be amazing. Let me look at my notes here, because I've got like a bunch of stuff. Let me just touch on this. You're sober. You've been sober your whole life, right? Dude, because
Yeah.
I'm also sober. I mean, I've not been sober my whole life. I had to quit because
Okay.
I used to drink a little much. But yeah, I've been sober for like 2 years and almost 9 months, I think.
Awesome, man.
So here, when I heard that you were sober, I was like, yes, Mike, go, Mike.
Yeah. I mean, like hard, like full on straight edge. I mean, I definitely don't like, wear X's on my hands or a triple X jacket and be like straight edge and like get in fights with people that drink beer or anything like that. But it started off like just the first band I was in when I was like 16. We were a straight edge band, and that was kind of like the cool thing to be. Um, and that was kind of it. And then just as time went on, I don't know, none of it really ever appealed to me. I think I've always had a pretty big paranoia of addiction, and I had a lot of functional addicts around me in my life, whether it be friends or family members or whatever, where nobody ever had a problem. But to me, that was the problem, was that it was like, well, you can't start your day without this substance, or you can't wind down without this substance or this outside influence. And I just knew that even as a kid, it's like, well, I can. Like, if I want to relax, I just tell myself to relax. And if I want to get excited, I just get excited. But I don't want to have to use anything to get there. So I've just always been really paranoid of addiction. So yeah, never tasted alcohol, never tasted coffee, never tried any drugs. Honestly, the only drug I've ever been interested in would be some sort of psychedelics, just because most of my heroes in business used some sort of LSD at some point in time, but I was never willing to mess with my brain. So probably about 5 years ago, a good friend of mine recommended sensory deprivation tanks. So I started doing that and just going into, sensory deprivation tanks for an hour at a time, where you just float in salt water in pitch black, and your ears are submerged underwater, so there's zero sound, zero photons of light for 1 hour, and you're weightless.
Wow.
And that's about as close as you're going to get to like tripping without any outside influence.
Yeah. Wow. I'd never heard of the sensory deprivation tank thing.
Yeah, it's pretty rad. So it's filled. They're about maybe 2 feet of water, but it's tons of salt. So it's like heavily, saline salt water. So you float as soon as you lay down, you float straight to the top, and then your ears are submerged, and you close the hatch, and it's pitch black. And then time, in a very Einsteinian way, time is very relative. You can't tell if it's been 5 minutes or 5 years. Like, and so it's always been a great place for me to go to work through things. So let's say like the UK drum show is a great example. I had probably 5 or 6 different clinics ready to go when you saw me, and they were all choose your own adventures. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen. As soon as I step on stage, I have to find out, are we willing to have fun today? And so you say like a light joke, and you just listen. And if it's, and you never wait for the laugh, you just keep moving, but you kind of pay attention, like, oh, okay, so we got a fun crowd. And then you ask something that's a little more deep, and you just pay attention to the eyes and see how everybody's reacting. And it's like, okay, now I know that we're willing to laugh and we're willing to go deep. Now I'm going to choose option 3 of my clinics, and now we're getting started. Well, to do that, I have to have all of those clinics planned out in my head. So I usually will go into a float tank, and I can get through like 4 or 5 45-minute clinics in an hour, because time just passes so slowly in there. And so I just, like I said, you can't see anything, you're in pitch black, and you just gameplay this whole scenario in your head of like, okay, so let's say that I make the joke and it's dead silence. I keep going, like, that's triggered option 2. Okay, we're going to go kind of serious. And then you say something deep, and everyone just, their eyes glaze over, and you go, okay, we're going very clinical because they're not paying attention to something heartfelt and they're not really in the mood for something funny. Now we're going with that option. And so that's what because I've seen it go really bad for presenters, drums and non-drums, where they decided this stuff was going to be funny and the crowd wasn't having it, but they just wouldn't let up. And then they get up, then they say things like, come on guys, that was funny. And it's like, you don't get to decide that, sir. We weren't feeling that as funny, or like somebody trying to be really deep. And it's like, look, man, this is like a kid's birthday party. You don't have to go deep. Like, you don't have to like try to be serious. Like, let's just have some fun and blow up some balloons. So I try to be as flexible to the moment, especially to the countries. You're in Germany. Germany is a great example of a country that the respect from the crowd to the presenter is so high. You always have to take that into consideration. They're not going to interrupt you with questions. They're not going to clap and yell a lot because they respect the presenter so much. But as an American, you take that as like, man, they're having a terrible time. And then as soon as you're done, they come up and say like, oh, that was life-changing. I appreciate it so much. And so you kind of have to know that going in. But the UK drum show is such a mixed bag of different countries. I didn't know what I was getting into. So I had to have like 4 or 5 different clinics ready to go.
Right. And it was definitely an innuendo kind of crowd, huh?
It was absolutely. Yes. Was that the backdoor one?
Yeah, the backdoor thing.
Yep, there we go.
Dude, that was gold. That was
yeah, and those are the things like you can't play. Like if I would have said something, because I think the first time I used the phrase backdoor, I was talking about the backdoor. So it wasn't even funny. But as soon as everyone laughs, it's like, okay, that's triggered this thing. Now I have a callback. We'll get, just like a stand-up comedian, as soon as it's happened, okay, I have to get back to that for our last line to close the clinic. That'll be the big laugh at the end. So you have a structure, but you're still free inside that structure to pay attention to what's happening and say, okay, well, this is the way this is going. I didn't plan for any of this, but this is how it's going. Let's see where it takes us.
Yeah. And how long have you been doing the woo thing with like when people open?
Never.
Like, you came up with that in the moment?
Literally. Yeah. Those are the best. And it's like, like if I would have said that, just for everyone that doesn't know, everyone that wasn't there, basically you're in this really cool room, but people are free to come and go as they please. So people are walking into your performance as you're performing and as you're teaching. And I just asked the crowd, like when no one was walking in, I said, hey, look, next time somebody walks in, just give a big old like, woo, just to kind of freak them out and see what happens. But if that didn't go well, if there was like 2 people that did it, cool, it's done. But because it did so well, then it's like, all right, this is now a thing. And it was awesome.
That was freaking amazing. That was I think the best humor in the room was you and Richard, because Richard Spaven, for the listeners who don't know, but dude, I mean, obviously his playing is like, that goes without saying, but like his humor, he's a comedy genius. I'm like,
he's amazing.
How is he so witty? Like he's just on.
And it's dry wit, and it's it's amazing. I mean, Richard's one of my favorite people in the world. That's why I wanted him to be in that room. He was in the room last year too with us, but he was also on the main stage, so he could only do 1 day in the education room. And I was like, dude, can you, like, I didn't get enough. Can you please come back? And so it was amazing. I love having him in there. And and he's just he totally undervalues how funny and how witty he is. He's just being him. But it's like, dude, you're amazing, man. I mean, I got to admit, like, I was in a little bit of trouble there, because normally I know that I can handle myself on a microphone. Like I feel like at this point in my career, I'm a professional public speaker. And then all I have to worry about is the drumming, because these are like the greatest drummers in the world. But I was in a bit of trouble where I was like, damn, Richard's crushing it. Christine's doing it in a second language. She's crushing it. And then Isaac Jamba was on fire in a second language. And I'm like, oh man, I got to step up my game. These guys, but Spaven he's the real deal, man. If anyone gets a chance to see Richard, obviously play live, that's amazing. But if you get to see him do a masterclass or a clinic, it's really pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it was actually my first time seeing Richard, and
Oh, really?
I went on to both of his clinics because like the first one I found so brilliant that that the next day I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go fit in Richard before Kenny Aronoff. So yeah,
I think
man,
that's a good call.
it was amazing. But yeah, I wanted to ask you this. So you told me recently that you were obviously, well, I know from your backstory as well. You told me that you're friends with Abe from Deftones,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you guys obviously came up together. You with Simon Says, and I know you guys, you know, Deftones, Papa Roach, and those like Sacramento bands. You guys all kind of came up together. Um, so I am like the freaking biggest Deftones fan ever. And Abe is obviously like many people, he's one of my big heroes. What was it? What was it like as someone who was coming up with those guys when like White Pony came out? How was that like for you? That experience when you first heard that record? I'm just very
Yeah.
curious.
Well, let's see. So obviously in the beginning, you're you're technically kids. So I mean, I was really fortunate. I went to high school with a guy who's a minor artist named Johnny Rab, and he's a phenomenal professional drummer. But in high school, he was just Johnny Rab, the first chair, you know, guy in jazz band. And then, yeah, like going straight into a band scene with Farr. So that drummer's name is Chris Robine, Abe Cunningham from the Deftones, and Dave Buckner from Papa Roach. Like, it was just what you did. It was, I mean, dude, we were playing coffee shops, you know, and we were all looking up to a band called Cake, who was the first one to get a record deal out of our town. Um,
Right.
it was like, oh my gosh, Cake got signed. Oh, they've got a single on the radio. And then shortly after, the Deftones got a deal. And their first album on, I think it was on Maverick, but was Adrenaline. And that was one of those things where we're like, I can't believe we can like buy this in stores that aren't in Sacramento. We can just go into a CD shop and there's the Deftones. It was weird because it's like, dude, we played coffee shops together. And it was really loud when you play a coffee shop with the Deftones and P Roach. But you know, to me, like Abe was just always one of those people that was, there was something different about his drumming. Like I couldn't connect with him on like drum nerd level, but it was like, it was always a mystery to me because I just thought like, well, I don't understand. Like, how are you not a drum nerd when you can do all this stuff that I'm struggling to figure out what you're doing? And he's like, you know, you should do it, man. And I'm like, no, I don't. I really wish I could. I would love to stop practicing and just do it. But so I really, Abe is one of those people that I love that his world is still a mystery to me. I don't understand where it came from. We were never like with Chris from Deftones and Dave from P Roach. We were in a different generation. Like the Deftones are like one band generation wise ahead of us. Like they got signed a year or two before Far, and then that happened like 2 years before we did, and then P Roach got signed after us. But I like that Abe is still a mystery to me, and every time I see him, I'm just like, oh, dude. I mean, yeah, I know we were like bros from, but I'm still a fan, man. And so I can tell you, like, the first thing that I ever heard from White Pony was actually, I don't even know if it was like an extra single or if it was originally on the album, but it was a song called Back to School.
Yeah.
And Abe basically, like, you know, we were somewhere in Europe, like doing a festival with Deftones and Mr. Bungle and Foo Fighters and Blink. It was like a crazy festival. It was like Taylor's first run with Foo Fighters. It was
Wow.
also like Travis's first run with Blink. So it was a lot going on. But I remember Abe took us on his bus and showed us Back to School, and it was like this polished version of the Deftones. I mean, it was still Deftones, but it was like, it wasn't as gritty. It was like, oh crap, like they're gonna hit the big time now, and it was really cool. And then the one thing that White Pony changed for, I think, for rock was that since John Bonham, I don't know. I mean, maybe John Bonham and definitely Ringo. We hadn't had a lot of songs that the drum beat told you what the song was. Where as soon as you heard the drums, you knew like, okay, I know what that is, you know? And I think that with White Pony, there was probably like 4 or 5 songs that if you never heard the song and you only heard the drum beat, you knew what it was, especially if you were into like modern rock at that time. And I just remember moving Abe in my world from like local dude that's like really sick at the drums. And honestly, I was always just trying to hit as hard as Abe. I wasn't even thinking about his drumming. I was just thinking about like just how hard he hit. And we were all just trying to like, all right, 24-inch mega bell ride, 12-inch snare, double ply clear heads. Let's go. Let's just see what we can break tonight. Play with your sticks backwards because there's no stick that's thick enough to handle what's about to happen. So that was literally like the way that Sacramento worked, was like 5 Bs backward are still thicker than 2 Bs forwards. So 5 As. So play with 5 As, save your wrists, but play with them backwards. Anyways, long story short, when White Pony came out, I moved Abe from like great local drummer into legendary drum part writer. Like, I really hold him up there right now with John Bonham, with Jeff Porcaro, with some of the greatest of all time. I mean, with Purdy, with Ringo Starr. Like, when it comes to writing a drum part, I just don't know in the rock world, besides maybe Dave Grohl, like who else is up there with Abe Cunningham. He's one of the best drum writers in the world, and he's a phenomenal drummer on top of that.
Dude, best snare tones in the game, hands down.
Absolutely. And I mean, I mean, it's just Abe has a magic about him, you know, and I just love him. And like, I love the band. I remember we were at, I think it was at Chino's house. They had played the Letterman show, or maybe it was the Tonight Show with Jay Leno at the time. Can't remember. But anyways, they played a show, and like, you could tell that it wasn't like and back then there was no miming. Like, you played on live television, and whatever happened. And in my mind at the time, I was like, I wonder how they feel. Cause like, maybe it kind of rushed here and there a little bit. They probably weren't on a click. Maybe Chino didn't hit every note like the album. So we watched them play. And like I said, like, you know, whether it was flawless or not, doesn't matter. But I was in that mindset of just like, it has to be flawless. This is on live TV. And the song's over, and they just start high-fiving, and they're stoked out of their mind, and they're loving every second of it. And I'm just kind of looking at my bandmates that are there like, oh, okay, cool. I mean, and really, like, they were right. It taught me the lesson of the Deftones. The Deftones aren't there and it actually taught me the lesson of rock. Rock isn't supposed to be perfect. It isn't supposed to be flawless. It's supposed to rock. And their level of gauging whether it was good or not was, how hard did we rock? And they rocked that show. And that was enough for them. And I was so like, it changed even my band. I was like, okay, because we always have like the debrief after every show. We watch it and we go like, all right, we rushed that. You hit a wrong note there. I missed a crash. And we point out all the flaws. They were the opposite. They pointed out all the positives. And they just had a blast. And I was like, okay, this is why these guys are legends, and why my band is still opening for Kid Rock. So long story short, it was just a great chance to learn about what it means to rock. And it changed my perspective on all of that stuff. And I still just hold Abe and the band to the highest standards. They're just amazing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Totally agree. But yeah, it must have just been crazy at the time to, as you say, to go from like go from being with them in coffee shops, playing in coffee shops with them, to like seeing that rise, that kind of, you know, and every album since has just been kind of like,
and yeah,
they like reinvent themselves, and just and you know, even the last album, Ohms, was like freaking amazing, and I can't wait for the new album next year, or I hope it comes out next year. But yeah,
it's pretty cool. It's really cool to see that whole thing happening. So yeah, very lucky to live in the little town I live in.
Absolutely, man. And so you mentioned before the festival with Travis and Taylor, and did you get to hang out with Taylor much?
Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, not too much. Those festivals are kind of crazy. There's just so much going on, and everyone's just running around backstage. And at that time, keep in mind, like, it's not like, to me at that time, it's not Taylor Hawkins from the Foo Fighters. It's Taylor Hawkins from Alanis Morissette. And I'm like, oh my God, Alanis's drummer is now in the Foo Fighters. This is crazy. Playing with Dave Grohl, who's the drummer from Nirvana. Like, this is 20 years ago. So it was such a different time. And I do remember, the one thing I do remember from that little run of festivals was I was leaving the stage. And I mean, these are like, 60 to 80,000 people, massive festivals. And I was leaving the stage, my band was done. And I see all the drummers, Abe, Dave, Taylor, and a few others, John Otto from Limp Bizkit, and John I can't even remember his last name, Wykowski from Stained. Anyways, they're all headed towards the stage as I'm leaving. And I'm like, where are you guys going? And they're like, oh, we're going to go watch Travis. And I was like, the dude from Blink? Yeah. Like, because at this point, there is no Travis Barker. Like, no one knows who he is. But they're like, dude, he's sick. You should check him out. And I'm like, oh, I'm good, dude. I don't need to go. It's a pop punk band. Like, and they're like, dude, you should check it out. So I basically just towel off, get a new shirt, come to the stage and watch him play with Blink. And it was just unbelievable. Like, I don't think he had in-ears, and there were no monitors anywhere near him. Like, they had, Tom and Mark had in-ears, but he didn't have any in-ears, and he didn't have anything near him. And so, like, I remember asking him, like, when it was over, I'm like, dude, how did you hear the band? There were no monitors. And he's like, oh, I didn't hear anything. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, I just count them in, and I just go. They can play to me. I was like, dude, you're the coolest person I've ever met in my life.
That's so insane. Wow.
It was amazing, dude. And he just lived up to all, I mean, there wasn't a lot of hype yet, but any time after that, for the next couple decades, that somebody said anything negative about Travis, I was like, that dude has earned the clout that he has. That guy he can play his ass off, but he's been a badass since day one. Like, so yeah. And it was a really cool time, because rock bands were such a prevalent thing in popular music. So I just felt so fortunate to be a part of that, get to see that world, and be able to see that world and go, okay, this is cool, but this is not my dream. I'm not happier doing this than I was previously when I was teaching private lessons at a local music store. Like, if I A-B'd playing to 60,000 people at a festival in Europe versus teaching a private lesson, the private lesson would win every day of the week. So that's how I knew it was like, okay, this just isn't for me. It's time to move on.
Amazing. Yeah. And I remember you talking about a video I saw many, many, many years ago where you talked about, like, so many drummers would or so many teachers specifically would drop everything tomorrow, or drop all their students rather tomorrow, if they got, like, the call to play for Sting or whatever. And that for you, it was kind of the opposite, to where you're such a teacher at heart that for you, the teaching is the thing that you want to be doing. And yeah.
It's the thing that I couldn't stop doing. I mean, even when I was on tour, I was trying to find, like, any drummer on tour to, like, be like, hey, you want to, like, do a pad lesson? Like, come on the bus and I'll I couldn't stop doing it if I tried. And so it's definitely what brings me the most joy. It makes me the happiest. And I think of, like, even, where we're at with the world now. And some people, like, say, like you're an online teacher or whatever. And I just always think, like, I appreciate that, but I'm just a teacher. Like, I don't really care what the medium is. If it's 1996, then I'm going to write a book and I'm going to make a DVD. And if it's 1986, then I'm going to write a book and make a VHS tape, and if it's 2046, then I'm going to be a hologram in your living room. But I just want to teach. So I don't really think too much about, like, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's in person, whether it's drum camps or drum festivals. It's like, well, I don't really care. Just let me do the thing. Like, let me just explain things, and whatever the medium is of that time, I'll just do it in that format.
Right. And so because you've obviously, you've been an educator for so many years, but having toured for so many years, I think you were between, like, 21 and 26 or something. You were on the road. So you mentioned before about, like, hey, you want to do a pad lesson with other drummers. Were you always the, like, nerdy guy with the pad that some drummers would be like, dude, what are you doing? You don't need to be doing this. And then you're like, no, dude, but it's, like the
Oh
rudiments and
yeah.
the dude, because I am that guy. And you know how often I get flack for that from other people or other musicians or other people that like give me a weird look, and I'm like, dude, what do you mean? Like, stick control is cool, man. Like, leave me alone. It's I mean, I got it.
Trust me.
I've got stick control right here, man. This is like my. I know you said you didn't go through this book, but this is like my Bible. I freaking love
That's
this
your thing.
It's
And
yeah, like,
that's what it's all about, honestly. Like, is like, for as drummers, these books are like actual fiction books to other people. Like, they mean something to us, and we feel like we're getting closer to the person that wrote it. And you open up stick control and look in that first page and find out the date, copywritten, whatever the date, or when I do it with syncopation or a George Lawrence Stone book, I'm like, 1926. Holy crap. Like, I'm struggling with this now. This cat was doing this in 1926. Like, okay, dang. And so like now there's history built into it. And then I start, even like, I mean, I do own stick control, by the way. I just haven't gone through it myself. Like, but I didn't get stick control from Amazon. I probably had it passed down to me. So then I'm thinking like, well, who was taught these exercises? How old is this book? Like, maybe this book's from like the 60s or the 70s. And somebody was taking lessons as a kid, and then that kid turned out to be one of the greatest professional drummers in the world. Who knows? And so I love all that stuff. I've always been like that. Back in the day when I was touring, you used to be able to go to the Berklee School of Music bookstore just without any like student ID or anything. And so anytime we went through Boston, I would go into their bookstore and I'd buy the whole curriculum for the year. And I would so like all the books for like, I was like, where's your drum curriculum? And I'd buy their whole curriculum and I would just take it on the bus and I would like go to Berklee in my head.
wow.
And so, yeah. So, and since I didn't drink and I didn't party or anything, every night when the band would go out, I would just be on a bus all by myself with like 5 books around me and a practice pad. And I'm like, okay, I'm taking this person's class now and I'm in 3rd period. And like, I was just like going to the school I wanted to go to. But when it was time to go to college, I got a record deal. So like I missed out on that experience. So I just kind of created it on a bus.
Dude, that's amazing. That's incredible. So yes, just like in whatever free time you kind of found, and while everybody else was off partying, you just were kind of you were studying
and then
the books.
and then what I eventually did for the touring, for like real touring, where you have like a bus and a trailer, because if you're doing festival gigs, a lot of times it's just fly gigs and rental gear, and you're just showing up to the event, play and leave. But for the touring stuff, I had a Yamaha Manukache kit, which is like a 16-inch bass drum, 10-inch rack, I think a 12-inch floor. And so I had that as well as my real kit. And as soon as we would unload the trailer, I would set up the Yamaha kit in the trailer and close the door. And I'd just be in like the middle of Texas in this like tin box in the middle of a parking lot playing for hours, just like literally in my underwear, sweating my ass off. Just like, all right, well, because I couldn't stand this whole thing of like, so we set up for sound check at like noon. And because we're the opener on this tour, we really don't get any sound check. And we play for 30 minutes a night. Like, that's my only drum time. Like, my friends at home that are my age are squeezing in 8 hours a day. Like, I got to practice. I can't just play these 5 or 6 songs every night and think that I'm going to be able to like hang with my buddies from Sacramento when I get home. So that's kind of, but I've always loved that journey of practice. Like, I think that to me, when you achieve the thing you're working on, that's the most depressing moment of the practice for me, because that means I don't know what I'm going to work on next. I can do this thing I've been chipping away at, and now it's like, oh no, I don't want to be at the summit. I want to keep climbing the mountain. So practicing anything is so much more fun to me than like, oh, I nailed it. It's like, ugh, damn it, now it's over. Like, I don't know what to do with it. All right. So yeah, so I practicing to me is just fun. So whether it's coming from books or from albums that I'm listening to or whatever, I just enjoy the process.
That's amazing, man. And with practicing, there's this, there's that moment when you're practicing something and you're like really like locked in, and then maybe in between practicing exercises, you have you have a noodle, or afterwards you have a noodle. There, like it kind of, because so for instance, I'm going through linear time playing right now, right?
Okay.
And I'm literally on like the first page. Like I'm going from first page. I'm doing what Don Familaro said. I'm taking like a year and well, mixed with what you said about, taking a year and doing just this thing.
Sure. This is the chunk of your
And
life you're going to do this.
Just dedicate it to linear time playing. And there's like a moment where it like unlocks this creativity. It unlocks like, and you're like, ooh, that's really, I didn't realize that like I was going to be able to do this so soon. And then you kind of get excited, but like, what do you do you experience that as well? What do you kind of have in those, like, or what do you do in those moments rather? Do you kind of quickly record it to come back to later, or do you write it down, or do you just let it flow in the moment? What do you do in that moment? If
That's
you
a
know
great
what
question.
I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost like a tangent, but it's a tangent of like, this might have more potential than the thing I was practicing. Because
Yeah.
the thing I was practicing was from someone else, but this thing is from me.
Yeah.
And that's always the aim, is like, well, when does it become me? Because I don't, it would suck if I played something and someone said, oh yeah, permutation number 6 from David Garibaldi's book, Future Sounds. And I'm like, oh crap. I didn't evolve that at all. Like I literally played it note for note. Like, well, I don't want people to recognize where the stuff came from. I want the opposite. I want people to say like, dude, that was so crazy. What was that thing you just did? And I'm like, actually, that's literally just future sounds. But instead of playing it on the hi-hat and kick and snare like David did, I moved it to the toms. Like I want to shine light on the thing by reversing it for people. So yeah, like when the thing comes along, then I think like that's the actual goal, is like, I don't want to play a Gary Chafee book. I don't want to play a Rick Latham book. I want those books to unlock a Mike Johnston thing or a Harry Michael thing. Like it's supposed to give us like freedom to be ourselves so that we can truly express ourselves, So yeah, I always follow the tangent, and then I have to like realize, have I left the source material so far behind that I'm now in a different world? And then I think that the thing that we are all struggling with right now is, why are you doing this? Are you doing this to film it? Because if you're doing it to film it, then it's not really like, that's okay. I mean, that's the world we live in. But it's really hard for me to practice and do something cool and not immediately think, oh, I'll go grab my camera. And it's like, dude, just hold off, like don't do this for them yet. Like you need to like fellowship with this thing. You need to do this for yourself. But it's like, we're all so starved, especially if you've been making content as long as I have. The second 2 new notes show up, you're like, oh, I got to film it. It's something new. And it's like, you don't have to film it. Just, and so I battle that all the time. Like, am I doing this to become a better drummer, or am I doing this because I feel like I need to feed the beast, whether it be Instagram or YouTube or whatever. But I also know how shallow I feel when I've done something like that, where I was like, dude, the playing wasn't even that good because I hadn't fellowshipped with it yet. I hadn't really flushed it out. I was barely like, it's kind of like I was just holding on to the edge of the cliff to be able to do it just for the video. And I never really feel proud of that stuff in the end. So I know like, okay, just give it its time.
Mike, we are now coming to the end of this episode. It was such a pleasure to talk to you, man. And is there anything at this point that you kind of want to plug? Anything you got coming up?
Oh man, that's really kind of you. I will say, if anyone listens to this episode and thinks that it's seamless, Harry is a gangster of editing, because we tried to do this yesterday. My computer broke down, and my computer has shut down twice now, and almost a third time since we started doing this interview. So if you're like, oh yeah, everything was cool, just know that it wasn't cool, and Harry crushed it. So I'll plug you. And no, I think, I mean, there's a massive, massive change coming to mikeslessons.com in January. And it's just me trying to solve the problem that I think all online websites have. And I'm not talking just drum educational websites, but just online educational websites in general. We all just have access to way too much stuff. It's not streamlined enough. And the reason why it has to be that way is because everyone that signs up for the service is at a slightly different point in their journey. So you do have to have a ton of stuff, so that if an advanced person signs up, they've got stuff to work on. And if a beginner signs up, they have stuff to work on. So it's always been a problem, but I think I've kind of figured out a way to solve that a little bit and to put some urgency into the practice and to really put some more. I mean, Sessions has fixed that in one way, but Sessions is so focused on songs, and there's so much more to this instrument than just playing songs. Especially nowadays, now that we have an entire generation of drummers that may never want to play with another human, which is very sad, but they grew up idolizing people on their phone that play in a room by themselves. So it's not up to us to say, back in my day, and, oh, you're doing it all wrong. It's like, well, it just is what it is. I respect it. And if this instrument makes you happy, then awesome. And I'll just gently say, if you ever get a chance to play with somebody, you might really like it. It's pretty cool. But anyway, so yeah, I would say just, what I'm working on between now and January 1st is going to take up every minute of every day moving forward. But I think there can be kind of a game changer coming to, hopefully. I mean, my dream for Mike'sLessons.com would be that someday I see non-drumming websites, I don't want to say ripping us off, but I would love to see like masterclass.com switch to our model. And I'd be like, I know where you got that from. And that's awesome, because that's what I like. I want to, if I can do anything long term, I want to have an imprint on education, not drumming education. I want to try to like move this thing forward as an art form. And so, yeah, so that's kind of where things are headed.
Hell yeah, man.
As much as I can say.
And let me just say at this point, I've told you before, but I have been a student of yours on Mike'sLessons.com on like 2 separate occasions at least. And I have honestly, I've referred at least a few people to the site, because every time someone asks me, hey man, I want to learn some drums, like where can I go online? Is Drumeo the one? Is this the one? Is that? And I'm like, I know exactly the place. Go to Mike's Lessons. It is truly, and I'm not just saying this to blow smoke up your ass, but it's truly the best online education site that I have. And I've tried like probably almost all of them. And honestly, it was where I found the most like motivation, inspiration, and progress in my journey of working off a site. So kudos,
thanks, man.
kudos to you, man. Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Well, when January 1st comes out and we launch the new stuff, I'll send you like a little like month-long pass just so you could try it out again. Man. And I would love to get your input on it, and just and take any criticism you have, because it's it's something that I don't get to decide how people learn. So we have to kind of be open ourselves as the educators to say, like, is this working for you? Is it not working for you? How could this be better for you? And how can I pass this information on to you in a way that you'll retain it in a better way? So I'll always take any kind of critique.
Oh, dude, I appreciate that. And yeah, Mike, such a pleasure talking to you, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
I'm glad we were able to make this happen.
Hell yeah, man. Mike, you have a great day, man.
You as well. Later, buddy.
Give me money.